I really enjoyed my time with Kamron Coleman. We spoke a couple days ago, and I've been chewing on things. I've been putting some visuals. I've been looking for what other books I could read to kind of flesh out what he's, a lot of his hypothesis. It was very interesting. I found out about him last week on the Stick of Joseph. I'll link to that as well. Very interesting stuff that he has. This conversation blew up into a couple hours, and that's like 2 of the questions out of about 20 that I had for him. If you have your questions, you can put them below. He is more than open to coming back on and maybe going over some more stuff, but I found this interesting comment. If you like this sort of thing, like it, subscribe. Let me know. I'm not exactly looking to collaborate with a bunch of people, but if there are some people that you would like to have, or like me to have on to ask some questions, then certainly I will consider that. So, here we go. Yeah, why don't you just give us an overview of what this project is, and maybe, as I was going into some of your artwork, I was kind of white knuckling it because, like I was saying, there's a lot. There's a lot, and I almost don't know what questions I should have, even though I have written a bunch of questions. But it would be nice to maybe know what you're not trying to do with this art, or what messages you aren't trying to put out there, or what hypothesis you're trying to put out there. So I'll just leave it to you.
Okay, I like that, Dan. I'm happy to talk to you today. I've enjoyed our brief correspondence so far, and I think that's a really good way to start. I've had a hard time describing what you're asking as well. Like it's taken me years to try to figure out how to explain what I'm doing. And so if you saw the Stick of Joseph podcast, Dave Butler did like a 20-minute intro about right brain and left brain.
Yeah. And can I just interject? I love that conversation. It sounded a little, listening to you two talk sounded a little bit like being a kid in a room with grown-ups speaking and not really knowing how, he's always 3 steps ahead of you or of me. So yeah, we might have to bring it down here a little bit.
So here's how I think of this. It's a vast project, like you said, and it's 8,000 hours into it so far, and it's half done. And so that's kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. So here's what it's not. It's not a picture of Jesus sitting on a hill overlooking Jerusalem that plugs into a correlated doctrine, right? So one way to do art, especially in a culture that buys art and that uses art for teaching, one way to do art is to make a pretty picture that people want to see, that helps affirm what they understand about the gospel, right? And it gives you a good feeling to see this piece of artwork. And it supports the correlation, right? It supports the message that the organization is wanting to put forward. And that is not what this is. This isn't a piece of art that fits into correlation. It's the opposite of that. So what it's intended to do is to be so comprehensive and vast that it starts a new conversation that is uncorrelated and that brings people in from every possible walk of life. This Apotheosis Scroll, so I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is not a product of that religion. It's not correlated to that religion. It doesn't proselytize that religion. What I'm hoping that it does is that my Taoist friend will come engage with me here about a common thread of religion that runs through all of humanity and through all time. And that instead of talking about Mormonism and Taoism, instead we're talking about the astronomy that informed both of those things. And veer off of that conversation between our two particular religions and talk about completely other elements of religion in time, in history, in world history. And so that we can be less siloed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Less tribal, and not to be this mushy kind of pluralism that is just like, yeah, just like everything goes, but to be able to have a language that deepens our conversation, not to just turn it into this free for all, moral relativistic kind of, but to engage people that typically wouldn't engage with each other, and kind of start to provide a little bit of a language about that. And so it's a mystery initiation work. It takes the viewer through 7 ordinances of initiation, from before they were born to their sitting upon the Father's throne in the celestial kingdom. And that is a common roadmap throughout the world, throughout the entire human history. And we got that roadmap from astronomy, from looking at the constellations and imagining Orion ascending from ordinance to ordinance until he passed through the veil, got married, and sat down on the king's throne and was enthroned with his wife, the Queen of Heaven. And that hero's journey is really fundamental to the human story. And since we got detached from the astronomy at the basis of that universal human drama, we now get kind of siloed and fractured into different performances that have kind of lost touch with that original archetypal ascension story. And so I'm just trying to show some of the language that informed that original journey. And it really is common worldwide, not in its specifics, but in its architecture. And so I'm just trying to say, I think this is the architecture that informed all of these religions. And I want to take you on this journey, not because you're a member of my church, not because you have any particular religion, but just so that we have something to engage with each other along this road, And so instead of somebody saying, hey, that's a pretty picture and I can use that in my lesson today to teach about this, I'm saying we're not even in that lesson.
Yeah.
We're in the world trying to have a conversation about where we all came from.
Sounds like you're saying there are much more common, not specifics in what is being, what they're named or anything, but there are common archetypes where the story is very commonly, people are painting a similar story in the skies when they're in the ancient days. They're kind of telling the same story with different sorts of names and ideas. Is that what you're kind of getting at? And you're trying to kind of build that up again?
Yeah, but they're telling that story with the same constellations from culture to culture. Yes. And so it's those constellations from Aquarius to Leo. So from Aquarius to Pisces to Aries to Taurus, which shares the ordinance with Orion, to the Milky Way veil, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. This is 7 ordinances or constellations that are found all throughout the Bible. The New Testament can be read by looking only at the stars. So the New Testament is hung on this architectural astronomy. And so if we understand how the New Testament is using that shared astronomy, and if we understand that the Old Testament is using the same astronomy, we just have a lot more information about the framing of ancient worship and what it has in common with civilizations throughout, all of world history. And so we've become very separated, like if the Milky Way is an umbilical cord, when you cut off the astronomy, you cut yourself off from that umbilical cord that kind of ties everyone into this one organism that's alive together. And now you're cut off, and everything just kind of starts to drift further and further away until people aren't speaking the same language anymore. People just have no understanding of each other. And so this work is intended to kind of get a conversation going that returns us to our very most ancient roots, where there's a lot of commonality and understanding there. And to read the scriptures without understanding how the scripture writers understood the heavens is to read the scriptures with an arm tied behind your back, So just kind of trying to start a conversation, but not finish one. What I'm doing is I'm offering a very, very far zoomed out vision of a potential hypothesis about a way that the ancients understood the heavens. And I'm showing that from the scriptures and from mythology, that there's these common understandings of this language. And I may refer to this Chinese myth, and I may refer to this or this. And I'm not pretending that I'm an expert in Chinese mythology.
But you see the parallels.
Yeah. And so I'm just saying, hey, you guys, what do you think? Is there a conversation that can be had here? And then I move on and say, what do you think, guys? Is there a conversation that can be had here about this? And so I'm not trying to both offer a giant question and all of its answers. I'm just saying we could all dig deeper into our religion if we learned this language together. What do you say, everybody? Should we kind of learn some of this language together?
Mm-hmm. So it would be a part of the hypothesis is that probably in the ancient world, people may not have been quite as siloed as we sometimes feel. A lot of shared ideas. We look at flood myths and things, and we see all these strange parallels, and we think, we didn't even know that maybe there was a connection between these societies, but it's hard to see these parallels and not kind of raise your eyebrow, even crossing oceans and things like that. And it raises the question.
That's really well said, really well framed. And so my understanding is that in, let's just say, the year 1000 BC, people didn't travel 10 miles beyond where they lived in general. Very few people ever had a reason to travel very far for generations upon generations. And so the cross-pollination happened through what we call hierophants, mystery hierophants, high priests and priestesses of various cultures that traveled. And they told these stories. And the good stories stuck from place to place. And of course, they're not going to have the same specifics. But these single stories endured for thousands and thousands of years. And so one, I can't remember the name of this author, but it's a book about anthropology, an academic book. On one hand, it talks about how people didn't go very far. On the other
Yeah.
hand, they think that there were people in those communities that traveled thousands of miles. So there's some people that stayed very close to home because there was just no reason to go. And then other members of those societies traveled continents, gathering culture and trade items. And they years later would make it all the way back with trade items and with cultural wealth, right? Stories. And these, in my imagination, when I am learning from an academic who knows, and I don't know anything, in my imagination, I can picture these star stories being transmitted very constantly by the few people that travel, and they just stick because they're good. The good ones stick, and the good ones get passed on. The ones that are too complex and too abstract are just not going to stick very well.
Yeah.
So the story of David and Goliath is really old. David and Goliath is a star story. It's a perfect star story. And that's in the Apotheosis Scroll on one panel. I show you the constellations. I show you the verses that are referring to the constellations. And then you can look at the stars or a star chart or whatever, and you can see the story of David and Goliath, plain as day. And David is Orion. He goes over to the brook Kidron and picks up 5 stones, and one of them is the stone. And that's the star Sirius, which is right there by the river, right there by the Milky Way. And so Orion goes over there, he picks up this star Sirius, and he swings it like this. And that's Orion. That you can see that slingshot motion that Orion's making. And he slings it over here to the giant, right? Goliath. Well, Goliath is the constellation Hercules. And the problem with the Hercules constellation is it has no head. It's clearly an anatomical man. It's got this shape, but it has no head. And it's always been really annoying to people that this constellation has no head. Well, in the story of David and Goliath, he cuts off Goliath's head, right? And the star that he flings at him, the stone that he flings at him, is known as the eye in the sky. And it hits Goliath right between the eyes. So it becomes his third eye, right? And it's a critique of Eastern mysticism. It's a flex. It's a polemic against the Easterners with their third eye tradition, and says our David takes that eye and with it kills the giant and cuts off his head. And so inside of the David and Goliath story, there's a whole other theological, cultural understanding, and you can see the story just right there in the stars. And the Bible is full of stories like that. And what makes it transmissible is not that everyone was reading the Torah and the books of Moses. What makes it transmissible is everybody's telling this star story. And so what's great about these star stories is they're transmissible on the level of the understanding of the individual, right? And so you could have a hierophant of a mystery, a traveling teacher, a priest, priestess, talking to you with your community at night, and there can be a level that story is understood by the smallest children, and then there can be a level that's understood by the wisest and most learned of anyone in the group. And the same story suffices for everyone. And that's how deep these stories are, and that's how simple these stories are. And so it's simple like a flower, right? It's very complex and it's very simple. And I think I didn't answer your previous question very well when you asked about like the movement, which is the stars are moving, are circling around together, and they start to shift off the horizon, and other ones come up above the horizon,
Right, because you
but they're
talk about
always the
Orion
same.
moving, and I don't exactly like is
Yeah.
you know, it's just how the
Yeah.
picture is being, how the pictures are being, like these different eras are
Yeah.
made. I still don't totally understand.
Yeah. That's really good. It's a great question, and I really appreciate it. So the stars are fixed in their position to each other, relative to each other. So Orion is always where he is. He's always next to Taurus and Aries. He's the good shepherd on the pastures of Earth, the terrestrial world of Earth as seen in the sky. And he's standing right by this big tree, which is the Milky Way.
Hmm.
He's always standing there. He never moves from that pose or place in the sky. But as the sky rotates, when Orion in the northern hemisphere rises above the horizon, he's laying face down. And as the night goes, if you watch the sky for any amount of time, you can see him stand up and walk across the southern sky to the west. And it looks so real that he's just a constellation. He is the one that all of this, he's the action figure of all the stories. He's got an upraised arm. He's got an arm extending out that looks like it's
Yeah,
holding a bow or
yeah,
other things. He's an action figure. And even though he's always in the same place relative to all the other stars, he looks like he's in action. And so he's imagined to be the one ascending from ordinance to ordinance. So you just have to know that all of the ordinances or constellations are fixed relative to each other. But because they're all moving together,
right.
it makes Orion looks like he's being slow motion animated.
Yeah,
And that's why we use Orion as the initiatic ascender who can go from constellation to constellation in our imagination,
hmm,
right? When really he's always fixed in the same place. But he's the guy that he's the hero of all the stories.
yeah. So I have two questions, and I think both of them have the potential of filling up a lot of time. Like I like writing myself, and once upon a time I thought I was going to write this big history sort of thing about Rome and stuff like that, but I keep finding that you always can provide more context and go further and further and further and broader and broader. And so I feel like, and anything I ask you, it can be very broad or narrow, and I'll just leave it up to you how you want to do it. But I have a couple things. I would like to go into these ordinances and how they maybe are painted on the stars, but I would be remiss if and I mentioned it in the emails, that I do the nativity pageant, the live one.
Right, right.
And so uh, it has always just fascinated me. We have this verse in Matthew 2 that has the wise men and going to they show up to Herod the king, saying, "Where's he that is born king of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east." And so I've never quite understood, first of all, what this star could be, maybe where it is supposed to have been, and why they would have even I mean, maybe that the location doesn't matter, but why Israel once they see it? Or is this just something that we just are supposed to leave to the imagination? Or is there something in these stories where they're expecting something and they know that once that happens, time to go to Israel?
Yeah. Yeah. Like you
And that
said,
could be
that's
a
a big
big,
question.
that could be a big,
And it's a
I don't
great
know.
question.
Yeah.
Let's try to make it as simple and and condensed a question as we can. But that if you understand the answer to that question, then you understand the entire work. You understand the entire scroll from beginning to end. And so just like no representative of any religion could express that religion in the next 10 minutes, right? We're going to try to give you an idea of how important your question is as a broad overview. And that's all we're going to be able. So I'm going to try to give you that question. But what you just asked is one way of asking the very most important question.
Can I just, before you get there,
distilling that? Yeah.
Before you get there, just going, we'll couch that just for a moment. Your artwork,
Sure.
Is it organized in terms of concepts or in terms of a large, early era, like a timeline? Like, are we all, would that arrival of Jesus be kind of in the middle, or is it a whole bunch of different things that you planned out in terms of other concepts?
Dan, you got the good questions, brother. Good job on.
I've been thinking about
this. Yeah, I can tell you have, and I'm really grateful because you're really thinking about it exactly as I would hope you would. So that's not that easy. That's a harder question to answer than your first one. Your first one's a bigger question.
Because probably a lot of things echo no matter where they are.
Yeah.
So where do you?
And so what I'm trying to convey is that the night sky is phenomenally complex. And as planets move through it, so the planets are what move. While the constellations move together, the planets are just like not making a lot of sense. The stories are trying to explain that action. Okay? So if you only explain it in terms of the constellations, you're stripping the understanding of all of its action. Okay? And so it's the planets that give it action. It's the sun and the moon relating to each other that give it action and story. And when there's a total solar eclipse, the whole system just goes, oh, like that, the amount of effort and, that everything has to correspond until you get this total solar eclipse. And you have the moon, which is exactly the same size as the sun.
It's amazing. I've never understood that. It's exactly right. If anything is a testimony builder, it's got to be that.
It's phenomenal. And so what would happen is if you had a total solar eclipse, so the sun is the celestial kingdom. The moon is a single motif that represents the entire terrestrial world. And the stars represent the telestial world. These are the three different worlds, the sky world at night, the terrestrial world that we lived on, and the underworld, which is the telestial kingdom. In a total solar eclipse, all three of those kingdoms are united at one time in one place. Like it's where heaven and earth and hell all come together for just a second. And the only possible word to describe that phenomenon, if you happen to be in 100% total eclipse, is peace, is the Prince of Peace. And that is the moment that the Apotheosis Scroll builds your understanding to. But as you start, things are moving and things are relating. And you're like, this is too big. This is just too big to understand. And you're like, okay, I'm starting out here. I have no idea where I'm going with this, because you're going to be initiated. a seal at a time. And understanding is, so I visualize the initiate of the Apotheosis Scroll kind of being in a spiral pattern, where they start out down here with some basic things. And it starts to swirl a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger as you go, because each time you pass by these things that are repeated and repeated, you have a little more understanding each time. And you start ascending this ladder that's in a spiral until you're picking up things and you're able to comprehend the movement, and things are starting to move and move until there's this moment when everything just aligns together, comes together, and the sun is completely concealed by the moon. Everything goes pitch dark. If there's planets in the sky, you can see the planets in the dark. Yeah. The all of heaven, earth, and hell are all united in one moment of perfect silence and peace. And then you're back to the swirl again. But now you know, the next time you go through this process, you're wiser now. You're an initiate of this system. And now as things are moving and chaotic, and this planet's going over here, and this planet's going over here, and this is the constellation that's rising with the sun, and you're okay. You're like, okay, I understand my place in this. I understand where we're going here. And you go and you go and you go, and that system builds and builds and builds until you are the pole star around which everything revolves. And so these are ways of understanding something that's just so complex, but there's basic rules to it. And if you understand the laws that are associated with this ordinance, then you have, whenever you read about that ordinance in the scriptures, it supplies its own understanding. And when you understand this ordinance, when you discover that in the scriptures, it's perfectly coherent with every other place that constellation is mentioned. And your understanding starts to grow about the laws and principles associated with each ordinance. And as you advance through them, you just get more and more mature in your understanding until the cosmos just combines to eclipse your imagination with the magnificence of God and the creation and your place in that system, which is eternal. It's an eternal place in that system. And so somehow I hope to foster that imagination in a people that have completely lost consciousness of the sky, the night sky, and the mythology and stories at the basis of the world scriptures, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about, you and I could probably argue about a verse of scripture together and never come to an agreement or understanding about that verse. This is like, hey, forget about that verse for a minute. This is part of such a big system that let's talk about something else for a minute. Let's zoom out instead of down here where we're fussing and quarreling over this. Let's zoom way out and see if we're even speaking about the same universe. I don't know if that helps with that, but it is complex. It's as complex as you say. And so the intention is to just, if you will submit to the process and start at the beginning, and don't go fast, but just start at the beginning and just kind of digest panel by panel, over time. And if it took a year to look at the first 12 panels, would probably do you more good than to try to take them in a weekend.
Yeah.
If it were me, when I was in the mood, I'd go in order and I'd look at a panel this week. And a couple of weeks later, I'd look at the next panel and just let it kind of see if see if you notice things in your daily life that corresponded to that panel that
Yeah.
you let into the right side of your brain. And so
Mhm.
it's intended to awaken and jumpstart. And because most people, approach the world in a left brain way with very task oriented intentions. And they might approach the Apotheosis Scroll with that same type of intention.
Yeah.
Well, it's not going to do any good. It's just not going to do any good. And so what I hope is that those who are interested will for a couple days or a couple weeks and see how your subconscious, now you start seeing all these things that correspond to that thing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then you're like, hey, I think I'm getting an understanding of this. And that's because your right brain is starting to tell you some of the things it knows, instead of your left brain confirming for you all of your ideologies. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it's an impossible goal. Maybe that won't work. But something has driven me to try to have that conversation, even though it's like the worst time in history to try to have that
Well,
conversation.
yeah, even when you're reading the scriptures, even though there are specifics that are being said, you can see some key words being repeated that sort of speak
Absolutely.
1,000 words already. So it kind of sparks
Yes.
something that you don't really, you have to kind of experience by seeing it as a whole. And so even though you can talk about these certain things, yeah, I appreciate that. That's very interesting. But a lot of people are going to want a lot of specific questions, or have a lot of specifics about things. And yeah, that's interesting.
But some but so what I think that people will understand is that it is not a picture of Jesus sitting on a hill overlooking Jerusalem.
Hmm.
They'll understand this is not that. This is something else. And the the language itself is very simple. Like the rules of the star language, you can teach a person in a few hours. You can do the ABCs in a few hours. And we're so detached from that I think that worldwide we really don't even know the ABCs anymore. And so, like, maybe I should have done the scroll differently so that it taught the ABCs first, and then maybe I should have done it more complex, and then maybe I should have done it more complex than that. But instead, what I did is I went all the way to
Yeah.
the the PhD level of my system. I'm not saying it's PhD in anybody else's world, but I went all the way to the meat.
Yeah. You put it all in there from the
Yeah.
first panel.
And now I'm going back and trying to find a way to just sing the ABCs. And so I just finished a manuscript, and it tries to just tell you what the ABCs are. And it's a 4-hour read.
Yeah.
And that's my effort to really just keep trying to cut, distill in how can I explain this in just a few hours.
Right. So
And
they
so
know what to look
that's a
for.
project. Yeah, that's a project that may see the light of day one of these days.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
that's not
think,
what the scroll is.
right. Yeah. It's clear as you look at it that there is, yeah, those ABCs would be really appreciated.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you can tell that there's a lot there, and the information that you have on is great. But even then, sometimes the information you don't especially know, maybe once I do a few more panels, it'll start to click what kind of questions I should be having about, or internalizing. But
I know you talked
Well,
about not
yeah.
having a bunch of specifics necessarily, and kind of putting it all in almost like cellophane, kind of layered on each other, and seeing
Mhm.
how these have all paralleled if you look through them. Yeah, I still want to know about. I still want to know why those wise men went to
Okay.
Israel, right?
So let me see if I can I can do that. Just kind of narratively here.
Hmm.
So when you when the prophet stood on the porch of a temple looking east, the sun would rise in one of the 12 zodiacal constellations. Okay. And it rose in the spring equinox in a particular constellation, zodiacal constellation.
Hmm.
That's what makes them zodiacal constellations. And there's 12 of them. And if you were on the porch of the temple looking east on the vernal equinox in 1000 BC, the sun would rise in Aries. If you were standing on the porch of that same temple in 500 AD, on the spring equinox, the sun would rise in Pisces. If you were standing on the porch, all the same scenario, in the year 3000 BC, the sun would rise in Taurus on the spring equinox. That's what determines the age that you're in.
I see.
The Old Testament was written in the age of Aries. So all of the symbolism that comes from the age of Aries is sheep and lamb
Oh, I
based.
see. Yeah.
Lamb and sheep, and because it's
Yeah.
Aries. So you can tell what age things were written in by the emphasis
On
of
those animals.
of the constellation that it's in. So you can tell when something is super old because it's Taurus based, because it comes from an era from 2160 BC to 4320 BC. And so we have things in our scriptures and in our oral traditions and our mythology that's bull based,
Yeah.
cattle based. And that's how you know where that story came from. And the Old Testament is full of sheep and lamb symbolism because they were in the age of Aries. The New Testament is full of fish symbolism because it is in the age of Pisces.
Mm.
And Jesus says to his disciples, I'm going to make you fishers of men, right? But there's lots of lamb symbolism in there too, because Jesus was the God not only of the New Testament, but also of the Old Testament. And not only was he the God of the Old Testament to the authors, he was the God of the age that preceded that. And so there's bull symbolism
Mm.
for Jesus in there. And so right now we're just entering the age of Aquarius, and it has a different set of symbols. And so if a prophet was writing a testament of Christ in the age of Aquarius, it would have Aquarius symbols, right?
Mm.
And to the writers of scriptures and the temple priests and priestesses, this was just the law. Now, this is the rules around which every story is made. You have to have the right characters in the right context. You can't put a sheep in Capricorn and have a story make sense. Everybody would be like, what are you talking about? You fool. That doesn't make any sense. You have to use the right rules. And then if you use the right rules, then you can tell the story. And so here's where Orion comes in.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm still trying to explain just this basic, how can I explain this in just a few minutes, this whole system? So you have to picture a clock, And a clock has 12 hours on it.
Yep.
And it has 12 o'clock position and 6 o'clock position. From 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is 7 ordinances, 7 constellations, 7 of the 12 zodiacal constellations. And from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's another 7 constellations. But altogether, it's 12 constellations. That's the zodiac. The Judeo-Christian tradition uses the constellations that go from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock it's Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo. That's a 13,000 year period. And the Bible, its focus is on those 7. In the East, the focus is on the other 7. Okay, so we're going to talk about these 7, which are the 7 of my faith tradition.
But in the East, are they speaking of those 7 in the past, or speaking of the 7 in the future coming up?
Oh, great question.
Or a little of both?
I'm going to say that they are highly better versed in the whole system. But the 7 in the East are the 7 chakras that ascend the spine to the Father's throne in Leo at the crown of the head.
But everyone, ubiquitous, or in the Eastern end there, they all focus on, Leo is still the top, is the head.
Yeah, it's the head and the crown, right? The crown on top of your head. And the crown around the sun, the corona that flows from the sun, that's the crown. And Leo, the planet that rules Leo is the sun, right? So the sun's at the top, is noonday, has a crown, is Leo, the Lion King, all those symbols, right? Well, the East gets there from the back, going up the spine. Okay. Well, the zodiacal system goes around and around in one eternal round. So if you go up the back, you go down the front.
I see. Yeah.
That means that the constellations that involve Aquarius to Leo are actually descending the body, which is the gut. And that's a lot less glamorous, right? Than ascending the spine to the Father. It's a lot less glamorous to descend down.
Which was the bottom again? That's the fish?
Aquarius.
Oh, Aquarius. Oh, right where we are.
The fish is at 5 o'clock.
So would the ancients see, in the East and in, with the East and in the front and the back, whoever's looking at both sides, would they view Aquarius as a pivotal age or just like any other one? Because
it's the first and the last. They're all super important, but Aquarius is super important. It's where the Father resides in the underworld. So the sun at noonday is where the Father resides in the celestial kingdom, right?
Yeah.
But the Father also resides in the South Pole, in midnight, in the underworld, and that's Osiris sitting on his throne there. And so Psalm 139 says, I can't get away from you, Father. Everywhere I look, there you are.
Yeah.
If I go at noonday, there you are. And at midnight, there you are. And it's referring to that. And so, in my religious tradition, there's a hymn that talks about the millennial reign of Christ that's anticipated any day now. And it says the earth will appear as the Garden of Eden, and it's anticipating the celestial kingdom. Well, that celestial kingdom is going to occur in Aquarius, which is at the 6 o'clock position. It's not the celestial kingdom that's in the Leo position. And so there's going to be this place. And what makes something the celestial kingdom is where the Father is. And so the Father is either Horus at noonday, or Osiris at midnight. And those are kind of what these stories are talking about. And so, we're on the edge of a astronomical moment that the ancients have been anticipating for millennia.
Man.
And we're right on the doorstep of that millennia old anticipation by the people that wrote the Judeo-Christian scriptures. And so,
no, go on.
And so the time, okay, the chronology of time has been descending from Leo through Cancer, through Gemini, through Taurus, through Aries, through Pisces, to Aquarius. That's the last 13,000 years. Humanity has been falling from the Father in Leo to our day now. And we're at the bottom of the fall. We're like, you can't fall any farther. And that's the fall. Okay? Is the fall of humankind down the front of the body.
Yeah.
We're being digested. But Orion, the initiate, ascends those same seals. So he's ascending against the current. So time and entropy is falling, right? The second law of thermodynamics, everything is falling, is dying, is slowing down.
Unless something's feeding it from a bigger source or whatever it is.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's what the world has been doing for the last 13,000 years, is falling through all of these constellations, from the celestial kingdom to the terrestrial kingdom to the telestial kingdom, where we are. And now, however, Orion is the unique figure that's able to ascend those seals against the current of entropy, which is so magnificent in my opinion. And so he's the initiate that no matter what is happening in time, you can ascend the seals against the current. You can ascend through the ordinances and arrive in the kingdom of God despite whatever's happening in the world. And so the temples offered ordinances, offered performances of these ordinances to help you understand that you are advancing from ordinance to ordinance until you ascend to the kingdom of the Father and sit on his throne. And you have to go against the flow of the Zodiac, but you can do it with the help of a high priest, with help of your religion. And Jesus in the Christian tradition is that initiatic ascender, the good shepherd that you're supposed to follow him on his ascent against the current and to the throne of the Father. And the whole story of the Gospels is showing you that ascension process. And to me, that's what it means to be a Christian, is to follow Orion, the good shepherd, in an initiatic ascent. And was the purpose of temples, was to teach that language and to perform those ordinances so that you understood that although you were born, you began as a fish in Pisces, you ultimately become a lion in the celestial kingdom if you follow the good shepherd through the shepherd's gate. And so that's an overview of the whole system.
Very cool. Very cool. So were they the ancients who were living in the age of Taurus? Were they, are there certain overall universal prophecies and things that they are expecting in these different ages?
Yeah, they anticipate the ages to come, and they talk about the ages in the past, and that's how the stories were. That was the purpose of the stories, was to say, you are here. the world is going to go here, but you can go
Yeah.
here. The world is going to end up at the very bottom seal, but you can go against that flow and end up in the Father's kingdom. And now, if you want, if that's all okay with you, I can segue into the pole star story from there. If you're,
absolutely.
if you're with me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Are you with me?
Yep.
Okay, so let's see. We talked about this clock, right? And now we're ascending. So the clock, right? The clock goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we are going 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as initiates, right? We're going against the clock's moving one way, but we're going against that flow.
Yeah.
Right. And we've come to Leo. That there's a lot of things you have to do to get to Leo, obviously, right? But we got to take this clock and we got to turn it on its side.
Can I just ask?
Okay.
Just to jump the gun here, is Leo the just thematically, I guess, speaking, if I was to guess, is Leo just on the other side of like the Milky Way when it's turning?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Like the last thing once you've passed through the Milky Way, as if that was a veil.
That's a great question. So I'm that guy on the porch of the temple looking east, and the Milky Way's rising straight in front of me.
I see.
As this column.
Yeah.
And when there was no light pollution, you could see this.
Yeah.
Now, right to the right-hand side from our perspective.
Yep.
You're the prophet on the porch of the temple. You're looking east, and you see the Milky Way rising like a tree or a fountain right in front of you. Just to the right-hand side of that is Orion. He's right at the edge of that Milky Way. And then just to the right of him is Taurus. And just to the right of that is Aries.
Yeah.
So there's this pasture that Orion is standing on. And he's the good shepherd standing on the pasture. He's in the terrestrial world.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Now, let's go back to that Milky Way fountain. Right to the left of it is heaven. So heaven isn't the whole thing. Heaven isn't the entire sky. Heaven is that part that you can see visibly in that scene. So don't worry about everything that's behind you, over in the west, over in the south. We're talking about the chunk of sky that you can see at that time when the Milky Way is right there and Orion's there.
Yeah.
The other things you can see is Gemini, these two figures standing in that Milky Way. They look like two little shoots off of a tree. And then there's Cancer, who's the queen of heaven, and then Leo, who's the father.
All on the left side?
Yeah. So there's two witnesses. Yeah. There's two witnesses sprouting off of the olive tree. Two olive tree witnesses sprouting off the olive tree. And then there's the mother and the father. That's your scene. That's heaven and earth.
Yeah.
The father and mother on the left-hand side of the veil. The good shepherd, who is the sun, and the pasture there. If you go slightly a little further, you can't see that all at the same time. But if it rotates, then you can see Virgo, the other female figure on the celestial side of the veil. So Virgo, Cancer, and Leo and Gemini are there. So there's a bunch of people on that side of it. Not all the constellations are people, but on the celestial side of the veil, there's a bunch of people. And that's the heavenly council, the Sod. And so are you with me?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with you.
So now we had this clock, right? And Leo's at the top, and Aquarius is at the bottom, and it's going in one eternal round. Now we're going to take that and we're going to lay it down like a plate, because that's really how this looks from Earth perspective. Is really these constellations are like, you know, those little roller coasters in the kiddie part of an amusement park. It's like that,
just going down below the horizon and back up.
Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
Thing.
Yeah, so that's what the zodiac is doing around the horizon. And sometimes these ones come up, right? And sometimes it's these ones that are coming up, and sometimes, right? Like a little roller coaster going around. So in that model, Leo isn't in the dome of the sky. So Leo is never in the dome of the sky. Leo is always, like the other zodiacal constellations, swimming around the horizon, right? So how do we get up there to the pole? Is
that the target?
That's the target. The target for the initiate is not only Leo, but it's to jump. Leo is the jumping point from the one eternal round of the equator to becoming the pole star around which everything revolves. And that's where your big question starts to come in is that's what would be called exaltation, being raised up, exalted into the high point. And the most high, that's where the most high is. That's where God is the most high. And you get there on a chariot. Elijah got there on a chariot, right? Well, the chariot is the Big Dipper. And if you look at the Big Dipper from an ancient person's perspective, it's a dead ringer for a chariot, right? Can you picture that in your...
Yeah, I can.
The arm of the Big Dipper.
And it goes over the oxen, maybe the arm, and then the chariots. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So that's the chariot. And the Big Dipper.
And that's how you know where to get to the pole star if you take
exactly.
those. Okay.
Right? Because that's where, so our pole star today is just
going the wrong way, though. Looks like the chariot's going the wrong way from the pole star.
Right. Well, that's because the pole star moves.
Okay.
And so right now, you're kind of falling out the back of the chariot a little bit, aren't you?
That's dropping you off.
Nice job. That matters. So, but in the time that the Old Testament was written, you were sitting straight in the middle of that chariot if you were in the pole.
Say that again.
If in the time that the Old Testament was written, you were sitting dead smack in the right spot in the chariot there. Okay? In the cup of the Big Dipper. So, but that was empty space at the time. So the Big Dipper revolves around the pole star.
Yeah.
It's like the main thing that you can see revolving around the pole star.
For sure.
And right now, just as you said, you find the pole star Polaris by going down the arm of the Big Dipper, down the bottom of the cup, and then you shoot off the front of the cup and you hit the pole star, right? Well, it's only been like that for the last 1,500 years. Prior to that, the pole stars were in entirely different places because the Earth is tilted. And if you draw a line, if you take a line through the axis of the Earth and draw it on the celestial pole, it has a wobble, so it makes a circle on the pole.
Right.
And it takes 26,000 years to draw that circle.
Is that if we did one full era of all these 12 different things, that's the full cycle?
precisely. So one way
Not a
to
long time.
watch the cycle is to see the sunrise in the constellations in the spring for 26,000 years. The other way to observe that cycle is that circle that's drawn in the celestial pole. Okay?
Right.
And now that celestial pole
That seems impossible to track.
That's why it's a testament to the antiquity of this stuff. You can't track this in generations. It takes millennia to even have any idea that there's something like this going on. And the ancients knew this stuff.
Yeah.
So the ancients had a knowledge of this that we just completely underestimate.
For sure.
And so that circle that's drawn in the vault of the North Celestial Pole, it hits various stars in that 26,000 years. And when it hits one of those stars, that star, or gets near enough, it becomes the pole star. So our pole star became the pole star 500 AD.
So the Phoenicians pole star wasn't the one we look at?
When are the Phoenicians?
Well, they're, it's like Carthage. I thought they were the ones that figured out the whole pole star thing, around zero or whatever.
Aren't they around prior to and around zero?
Yeah, like the Carthage was something like 200 BC or something like that. And I think they were figuring it around something like that.
Yeah. So if we're right about that, the pole star at that time was not Polaris at all.
That's new to me.
There was no pole star at the time. So Polaris, our pole star became the pole star at 500 AD. It got just close enough that they could now consider it a pole star. It will remain the pole star until 3000 AD. It will reach its peak of accuracy in 2100 AD. So in 75 more years, Polaris will be the closest it ever is to being the actual pole.
But still never dead on.
I don't know. I don't know how
Maybe
close
not.
it is to dead on.
Close though.
Yeah, it's not necessarily dead on, but it might be awfully close at that point.
Yeah.
In 3000 BC to 1000 BC, Thuban was the pole star. And Thuban isn't in the Big Dipper at all. So what happened was so now if you have a sense for this, for the scope of what we're talking about, right? That the ancients understood thousands and thousands of years ago. The way this pole was of utmost importance to the Egyptians and to everybody else. But the Egyptians, their mythology, their religion around it is what I think the whole world was speaking that language. And so there's a mosaic that was recovered from the Dendera temple in Egypt, which is the temple dedicated to Hathor, the Queen of Heaven. And she's stylized as a cow. And in that mosaic, there's a giant figure of a cow standing up. And then right next to that giant cow is a cow leg, just a cow leg. And the Egyptians called that the thigh of the cow, and it represented the Big Dipper. And if you think about it, the Big Dipper looks like
with the foot being the chariot thing.
The foot is the end of the handle.
I see.
The basin.
Oh, I see. Not yeah. Okay.
Is the thigh of the cow, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the cup is the thigh of the cow, and the rest of the leg is the handle. And so I did a lot of research that began with looking at a star chart to say, if that's the thigh of the cow, where's the cow? And there's an awesome constellation of a cow. It's one of the greatest, coolest looking constellations. And it's not recognized, as far as I know, anywhere I've never found any recognition of it. But in my imagination, there's a great cow constellation if you let that Big Dipper be the thigh of the cow. And the constellation Draco makes up the belly of the cow and the other leg. So the underside and other leg of the cow is the constellation Draco. And then the constellation Cepheus makes the head of the cow. And if you use the Big Dipper, Draco, and Cepheus, you have a cow. And I can't imagine anybody being able to picture that in their imagination because it's not in our...
No, I'm just thinking if it's in the scroll.
Yeah, it's all over the scroll.
Okay. No, I was just thinking if that's the leg, the pole star right in the stomach.
Yeah. That's where we're going. That's where we're going with this. So in the time of Egypt, of Thuban, they recognized the pole star as being Thuban. And Thuban was in the udder of the cow.
Oh, the udder.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm listening.
And their highest ordinance was to wipe your mouth with milk because you are nursing from the mother cow. Okay, so that's how they represented the most high ordinance in their whole religion. And I haven't seen this I've looked for this and I've only found slight references to it because I haven't found anybody that has really put this together. But you're nursing from the udder. And then in 1000 BC, that star is no longer at the udder of the pole is no longer at the udder of the cow. The pole is now in the belly of the cow, which is dead black space in the driver's seat of the solar chariot of the Big Dipper. Okay, so there's no pole star, but you're sitting right in the chariot. So that's where we get this great stuff from the Old Testament about chariots. And in Solomon's temple, as we learn in 2 Kings 23, Josiah guts the temple of everything, including the chariot of the sun, and kills the horses associated with it.
Yeah, and we read that and we assume that it was a great thing that happened and we go on our way. And
yeah, I think it's a travesty. So
yeah,
but what they're saying is but the mercy seat. So I picture, you can't find this in the Old Testament because they've completely burned the solar chariot, right? But I picture the Holy of Holies being the parking garage for the solar chariot, because you have a chariot parked in there and there's a mercy seat upon which the formless God sits, right? Well, he's sitting in the driver's seat of the chariot, and that's where they place the Ark of the Covenant, because that's what was happening astronomically. And so the cult of Yahweh, which starts in 1000 BC, is the cult of a formless God that has no physical temple, because the pole star is formless and has no physical manifestation. It's just empty space. And so they correctly describe Yahweh as a formless God with no place to dwell.
And that's the first time they're talking about a formless God in that way.
It appears to be, to me.
I mean, maybe.
And that to me is what the cult of Yahweh is that innovation, is that recognition and innovation. And
or at least at some point he's not in that space. There's something happening where there's just that empty area, and that's significant to them.
And it's everyone is recognizing that there is no pole star, and there isn't even a star that you can
rely on, really. Yeah. I mean, kind of, but not really.
And so you know that the pole is in that empty space.
Yes.
The Most High is formless and in that empty space. And the temple reflected that knowledge. It's really great. It's really great.
How are you finding this stuff? Like where you know, are you just
as far as I know,
lectures
this is my hypothesis.
Right.
As far as I know.
Right.
Once I have an inkling of this, then I do hundreds of hours of research trying to
find
something that either confirms or denies
yes.
it.
Yeah.
And I feel very confident that this is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you've got, and the Old Testament gives you all kinds of clues to this, because they hate the people that don't go along with the Yahwist perspective, and they give you all kinds of context for it. And so the story of the golden calf in Exodus, right? Moses goes up on the mount, and when he comes back, Aaron has created a golden calf. Everybody's pitched in, and well, that's because there's this empty space in the womb of the celestial pole cow, right? And I named this pole cow Bossy for the Coleman family milk cow.
Okay.
And we have the favorite family picture is my dad and his brothers and sisters sitting on the back of Bossy, the cow. And so that I've named it Bossy. I think to the Egyptians it was named Hathor. And so now the pole is in her womb, right? And Moses goes up on a mountain. He comes back down. Everybody's worshiping a golden calf. Why are they worshiping a golden calf? Because they think that it, rather than worshiping this formless God, they're anticipating the birth of the Messiah from the celestial pole cow. They're anticipating a sign in the heavens that says that the Messiah has been born. And Moses comes down and says, you guys are all in big trouble, because no such sign has happened yet. That's not what we're doing.
You can't invoke this.
Yeah. If you do that, that's a false God, because we're doing Yahweh until the Most High is embodied again. Okay. And I believe that the star that the Magi saw is a supernova or a comet that appeared in the womb of the celestial pole cow at the turning of the age from Aries to Pisces. So the only place, like if you take your star app, you can like Stellarium is what I use, which is a tremendous thing. The Stellarium app, you can see all the constellations, and they have forms around them. You can see, it tells you what Orion is, and it animates him. It gives him a cartoon like outline, so you know who he is. And you can go back in time to any date you want. And you can go back and look at you can watch the stars revolve at 0, at 6 BC, at 6 AD. At any date, you can see what the stars were doing at the time. What it can't tell you is what a momentary thing did, right? No one knows. And so people will say, I think that Jesus was born in 3 BC because this sign happened in Virgo. Or I think that Jesus was born in this year, in this month, because this sign happened in Leo,
because
right?
A couple planets came together and looked like something or whatever.
And I think that's incorrect. The sign that they're looking for is a sign in the womb of the cow. And as soon as there's a sign in the womb of the cow, which is the Most High, which is the pole, now you go. Now the God has been born.
So really that's the significant area of the sky that they're looking at more than anything. If there's going to be a sign, it's right there.
There's two. It's either
because
or
everything revolves around it. So that's the spot.
Yes. One other potential spot is the spot that all the pole stars revolve around, because we drew
a better spot.
That's the more sure place. Because we drew a circle on the heaven, right? And there's some stars smattered around, and those become the pole stars. But if you know that between all those pole stars, there's a pole to the pole stars, that's the nail in the sure place.
So if you were guessing, and you know, if you were guessing that supernova probably happened right in that spot.
I think it happened in the womb of the cow.
Right. Okay.
To say, and then Revelation 12 tells us it did.
Mm-hmm.
It says that Draco, the red dragon, tried to kill the child right when it was born. So Draco tried to abort the child. Should we look at it?
Sure.
So remember, Draco forms the underside of the cow, right?
Yep.
And it's in the bend of Draco that that void is. Okay, the womb is formed by Draco's serpentine shape. And so in Revelation 12,
yep.
says, let's see which verse it is. Okay, it's 4. Let's do 3. Okay, let's do 2, because 1's too complex for us to get into right now. It'll distract us.
Okay.
It's good, but we don't need to.
I'll
that
wait for the
deserves a
video.
conversation in itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 says, and she, that's the celestial pole cow, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. That's Draco.
Gotcha.
Okay, universally, that's just a fact. Having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman. So Draco's right there with the celestial pole cow, right? In fact, it's part of the thing that makes her constellation. The dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
Wow.
And she brought forth the man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. That's verse 5. So the child is right there at the throne of the Father, right? The Most High. And Draco is trying to abort the child or kill it right when it's born. And so it tells you that that's where this is happening. And so in my opinion, and central to the whole purpose of the scroll, is that there was a star in the womb of the celestial pole cow that told the Magi that the event has happened. It's happened. You guys, it happened. And the cult of Yahweh has been waiting 1,000 years for this event to happen. Okay, so it's not in contradiction to the cult of Yahweh. I'm not a fan of Josiah. I think that's an apostate,
right,
a massacre. But it gives you the clues to what the complexity of what's happening. This is the story that they understood that was happening. And so when somebody says, hey, the star happened, you guys, it's Israel, it's their story. And so the Magi are looking in Israel for this sign to be accomplished. All of Israel's signs are around this empty space. And the age of Aries is symbolic of Israel for many ways, you know, with their horn blowing, with their ram and lamb sacrifices, you know, they represented the age of Aries more than any other group, more than any other civilization in their temple worship. And they had the cult of Yahweh right. And so the hierophants of Persia, the Zoroastrian Magi said, look, we just saw the sign. We know where to go. And they were watching for the Messiah in Israel, who was represented by that star. And all it had to do was be a fleeting moment of a comet or a supernova of a star that was not visible until it went supernova. And there you've got it. You've got the birth of the star child, of the golden calf, because we're talking about the celestial kingdom, which is represented by gold, the highest metal. And the child of that celestial pole cow is going to be a golden calf. And that's what the story of the golden calf in Exodus is pointing to, right? And then, but we have this bias that it's so apostate, right? So idolatrous. But really, if we understand better, it's more about the timing and more about the protection of the cult of Yahweh, and just tradition has made it, has entrenched it, right?
Yeah.
To where we aren't able to recognize that they were anticipating this birth. And it was recognized by people, I think, worldwide, or like, because they knew this background, and they're like, yeah, the Son of God is born. And now it happened to coincide with the proper transition of the age from Aries to Pisces. And the Son of God is born. And Malachi 4:2 says, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in his wings. And it's S-U-N. Everybody's anticipating the Son that represents the death of the god of Aries, which is a lamb, and the rebirth of that god as a fish. And there's the sign that accompanied all of it. I believe it. Mm-hmm. I think the story's so amazing that I feel religiously about it.
Yeah.
But you could just think it's cool. You could, and it is cool. Yeah. But for me, that's a really religious, that is just this convergence of thousands of years of prophecy and ways of worshiping, and it happens, and it just happens that way, so poetically. I just can't. That's what I think the story's about. Mm-hmm. So does that answer the question about the right?
Yeah, that's very, very, very interesting. I've never even heard anything like that. So it's something to think about.
Huh. And then what happens next? This is just as cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so now this thing happened, right? And a new mystery cult is established to acknowledge that happened.
Yeah.
And that's the Roman mystery that gets built right at this time. The Romans say, that was cool. That was really poetic. That was a
moment.
Good.
No matter, we might not have all the names for it, but that was a moment. That was something.
Yeah. And they built a new mystery on that new world's understanding, right? And that star came and went presumably very quickly, right? We see comets right now, and we can see them, and there's some hours involved, but not much more, so it's a fleeting thing. And so now they're like, okay, the pole is going to continue to rotate out of this womb. And where is it headed? It's headed to the celestial pole cow's back. So it was in the udder, then it was in the womb. Now it's going to be sitting on the back of the cow. And they create a mystery based on the pole sitting on the back of the cow. And that's the Mithraic tauroctony scene that's all over the Apotheosis Scroll. And that's saying that Christ was born here in the womb, but when he comes again, he's going to be sitting on the back of the cow. And so the second coming of Christ is all related to the star Polaris. And the reign of that second coming is in its fullness from about 2000 to 3000 AD, which is the millennial reign of Christ that the Christian tradition has. And so the purpose of the scroll is to show what the heck that might mean. How do you have a 2,500 year reign of Christ? And I think that it's talking about the second comforter. I will send a second comforter after I leave, and you will have the Father in you, and the Father and I will come and dwell in you. And that's the promise that Jesus leaves his disciples, that after I go, don't worry, I'm going to come back, and and I'll abide with you, and I'll be in your heart, and I'll be in your mind, and so the Roman mystery establishes this very phenomenal sculptural scene that depicts in the sculptural scene this astronomical mystery and how the Holy Ghost comes to you in your body. And that's what the Mithraic tauroctony is. And I think that was part of the original Christian movement. And that's what we call the mysteries of godliness, as opposed to the ecclesiastical church, which was led by Peter.
Huh. Because we don't have their writing for a lot of that stuff, right? Like, we don't have all the details.
Every scholar says there is no written liturgy or documentation of any kind for Mithraism, even though it was the official Roman mystery, and it was practiced by the Roman military, which was worldwide, and in every Mithraic temple, the tauroctony scene was repeated as accurately as humanly possible by its artisans. And so the scene was correlated. And then if you were in Israel, it was performed differently and its hero in Israel was Jesus of Nazareth. But if it was performed in France or Germany or anywhere else, it didn't have anything to do with Jesus. Mm-hmm. So its hero was the local hero.
Right.
And so, but in my hypothesis, Mithraism began under the emperorship of Vespasian, and that reign is
he was in like 50 or something, or no, he was around just before the destruction of the temple.
Yes, and his son Titus is the one who carried out the destruction.
Yes,
and I think that
because he was in Syria at the time, he was in that area. And then he was a general. Then he went back to Rome and became.
He never, if I'm correct, and I'm not an expert on the Roman Empire, but if I'm correct, he didn't actually live in Rome at the time. They actually lived in Caesarea Maritima.
Oh,
because typically they did live in Rome, but they went through those 4 emperors real quick.
Yes.
Rome's a civil war is a disaster.
Right.
The biggest problem was the Jewish revolt. And instead of being based in Rome at all, the Flavians just stayed in their
Josephus since that time.
Yeah, exactly. And they were based out of Caesarea Maritima. And there's a book called The Struggle for Rivalry and Religious Success. Let's see, it was called, maybe I can give you the link after. It's a really important, Religious Rivalries and the Struggle for Success in Caesarea Maritima. That's the title.
Okay. Very niche.
Yeah. And it's written by it's an anthology. It's a grouping of several different articles by different experts on Mithraism and Caesarea Maritima. Caesarea Maritima is the port city of Judea, of Roman Palestine. So it was a city that rivaled any port city in the Mediterranean. Very central and important port city. And it's where the Flavian dynasty prosecuted the war against the Jews. It was a 1 day's march for the Roman soldiers from Caesarea Maritima to Jerusalem. And so that's where the Flavian dynasty headquartered, and from which they put down the Jewish revolt. It's also the site of what these scholars propose is the first Mithraic temple, which was initiating Jews into what modern scholars call Mithraism. And it didn't have that sculptural scene, but they did find a coin of the scene because the Jews could use coinage. So they couldn't have the sculptures and the art depicting any of these gods, but they could have the coinage.
Yeah.
And so they hypothesized that this is the first Roman Mithraeum where Jews were being initiated where Christianized Jews were being initiated into Mithraism. Now, as Mithraism disseminated through the Roman Empire, it didn't keep the same centrality of the Christian movement. It took the local gods from wherever it was, and it focused on those. But what's significant is it appears possible, and I would be all over the hypothesis that Mithraism was a Christianized Judaic initiation that assimilated willing Jews into the Roman body politic as part of the Pax Romana.
Right, a way of making it palatable to Jews, because or to Romans,
if you don't,
to Jews.
You're dead.
Yeah,
either do this or we'll kill you.
Yeah, and you can still, very interesting.
But it offered their hero, Jesus of Nazareth, as the ascending Orion initiate,
right?
As Mithras.
Would that be kind of akin to how Freemasons would allow people of all different types to come in, and there's some central ideas, but people can kind of keep their own sort of...
It's a perfect analogy.
Okay.
It's a perfect analogy, and even more so because Freemasonry talks about Mithraism all the time and claims Mithraism as one of its
foundational
primitive
stuff.
founding.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think that Roman mystery is carried elementally through Freemasonry, which I'm not a Freemason, for the benefit of your listeners. I don't have anything against it. I just don't happen to be.
Yeah.
And so when I think that when the New Testament is talking about the mysteries of godliness, it's talking about Mithraism. And you asked is there any written record of Mithraism? None.
No, none official. But
none
maybe they are. Okay.
And then the primitive Christian movement has many parchments, many scrolls of gospels, right? But no archaeological evidence. I think that Mithraism is all through the New Testament and is the mysteries of godliness being described in the New Testament. And so if I could backtrack a little bit here and give a little bit of context for that statement, I presume, the documentary hypothesis about the Old Testament, that it's written by several different parties, right? Do you want to explain it so I'm not talking so much?
Well, no, you go ahead. But it sounds like they're different parties, but things get kind of put in. It's not one person writing a whole story. Sometimes it's grabbing some of this. Sometimes they go against each other. Sometimes they align really nice. But it's like it's like taking 10 people who have told the same story and then you just mix them all together.
Yeah. And it's more encyclopedia type of a, where the Old Testament doesn't give you a a coherent theology. It gives you principally 4 different perspectives about things that were going on around. But they're self-contradictory. What the scribes were doing was different than what the Elohists were doing.
Right.
But their account is side by side. So you can see this account and this account and this account. You know, okay, these
the
3
historians
of those groups
and stuff.
Yeah. Like these 3 groups talked about this event. Here's their account. Well, this event was talked about by 2 of them. Here's their 2. This one was talked about by all 4. Here's their 4. You know, and so if you read the Bible as if it's all going to be one coherent theology, you have to make it so in your imagination. You know, when really it's just kind of a gathering of these various things. Well, I see the New Testament as the same thing, not as a single coherent ideology, but as a grouping of different perspectives and of 3 primary different perspectives: the Jewish perspective, represented by James, the Greek ecclesiastical perspective as embodied in a literary archetype of Peter. You know, so we're changing these historical people into literary archetypes.
Yeah.
And so James is a historical man who led the church after Jesus died. I mean, the Jewish movement, the temple. But he becomes a literary archetype for the sake of the story. And Peter is a historical person that becomes a literary archetype of the ecclesiastical church. And John is a historical person who became a literary archetype of the mysteries of godliness. And I think that John represents Mithraism, Roman Mithraism. Peter represents Greek ecclesiastical administration. James represents Jewish tradition, the gathering of Israel, the Abrahamic covenant, etc. And so I think that we can find the written record of Mithraism in the New Testament. And so,
but if anything was too overt, you know, by the time of when people are canonizing and things, was it that got the chop more than anything, you think?
Yeah. What happened is that because Mithraism anticipated the second coming of Christ as
can't
being
have that in the Roman Empire.
Once in 500 AD.
Right.
You can't have Christ showing back up again.
No.
Because he's being represented by the Pope.
And he has a sword and stuff.
And the emperor. Yeah.
You know, he comes like,
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And so you can't have the second coming as anticipated by Mithraism. And so you have to. And so in Theodosius completely eradicated all mysteries. And one of the last mysteries to go was Mithraism, which was the official mystery of the Roman military, because it was really good. Like, they didn't want to let this mystery go, but they had to. And because the figure represented as the second coming of Christ was wearing Persian clothes.
Can't have that either.
And they were going to war with Persia.
Yeah.
World War with Persia.
No, you can't create you can't do that.
Yeah. And so this what do you call it? This syncretized figure, which was Mithras, which was intended to be every man from every place, because you, Dan, are going to, the second coming is going to come to you, right? And Mithras represented that democratization of celestialization, okay? And that's anti-Catholic, big Roman government, right? You can't have that sort of democratization.
Yeah.
And so that figure that embodied that was a Phrygian youth with a cap and a red red clothes, and he's just a young man. He's just a young man.
Yeah, the little paintings. He just has that little red
Yeah.
cap, right?
Yeah, and he represents every man and freedom and purity and
Powerful
youthful
icon.
innocence. Yeah, and that was an icon that went all the way through the American Revolution. The original U.S. Army medal depicts Mithras, depicts that Phrygian cap. It's a symbol of freedom. It's a symbol of democratization, right? Of the people coming into their own. And
that has nothing to do with halos or like the Statue of Liberty crown or things like that, or are they kind of connected? I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but
the founding symbols of America are Mithraic. America, you could say, was a restoration of the Mithraic Roman Empire. It was restored under those ideals.
And were they highly looking up in the skies as well? And basically, you squelch that, you squelch those, you squelch the looking at, the ideas of all that's happening up there. Don't look for eras anymore. Don't look for the next things.
They made it the death penalty if you did.
And now it's connected to the occult and things in a lot of minds.
Right. That's because, and they turned Mithras into the devil in red, right? The devil with red. And so they complete the church fathers. So in Mithraism, they were doing the sacrament of bread and water. They were having a communal meal. They had baptisms. They had all the stuff that the Christians were doing. And the church fathers said, centuries later, this is a satanic imitation of the Christian sacrament.
Yeah, for sure.
When more likely it was a rival perspective on Christianity from that very first generation, right? The Christianized Jews in Caesarea Maritima, who were represented by Philip, the Apostle Philip. Philip wasn't canonized, because so the church fathers rejected the mysteries of godliness and went with Neoplatonism, because the mysteries of godliness were based on an agricultural cycle, the astronomical agricultural cycle in one eternal realm. In other words, pagan.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's based on the bread of life. Well, Neoplatonism says we don't want any more of this bread of life stuff. We want to go straight to heaven without passing go and never come back. Never. Right? And so all of that takes hundreds of years for those rivalries to get more and more intense. In the first century, those rivalries are combined to syncretize them in the Pax Romana. But 300 years later, those things that were syncretized are now unpalatable and can't be reconciled. Anathema. And you get rid of the mysteries of godliness. You suppress the mysteries of godliness in favor of Neoplatonism and this pyramidal styled church, right? And the James tradition is long gone. The James tradition was thoroughly, completely eradicated by the Jewish-Roman War. So that James didn't get very far. But John and Peter continued as rival ideologies for hundreds of years until until Peter just couldn't abide it anymore, and the mysteries go underground, right? And Mithraism becomes anathema, and now, but it's in the scriptures. It's all over the scriptures, and in my opinion, the Book of Revelation is John's initiation in Mithraism.
Wow.
And so some people say that the Book of Revelation took as much as 500 years to write, because you can see in it, you can see this core beginning mystery. And then you can see edits in there that, like, it's funny because you know how when they make new laws, like here's these laws on the books, and then they change the law, but they keep everything else. They don't eliminate what was in the law before.
Yeah.
You can see what was in the law before, but they just tack this thing on the bottom of it that changes the law.
Yeah.
And then they change it, but they don't go back and edit out the prior stuff. Well, that's the way the Book of Revelation is built, is it has a core story that has these amendments to it. And these amendments say, don't do that. That's actually bad. So you're going through this Mithraic initiation, and it says, yeah, all that stuff that you just read, that's satanic now.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
And you go through more of the initiation story, and it says that all that stuff that you just saw there, that's Satan stuff.
Yeah.
And then they go through more. And so Revelation is a super impossibly complex book written by numerous authors over hundreds of years to take what was first a Mithraic initiation story and to turn it into an anti-Mithraic polemic.
Wow. I mean, geez. Anything from anything slips under the radar that Joseph Smith talked about or revealed that maybe, maybe could be mentioned? I mean, there's so many things that
in my opinion, Joseph Smith was restoring Mithraism. In my opinion, Joseph
Smith some central ideas about it.
Yeah. He was restoring that original rivalry of Peter, James, and John. In my view, what Joseph Smith was the restorer of that original team of rivals of James, Peter, and John. And he's giving all three of them equal voice. I don't know where he gets this stuff or how he did it, but somehow he's the recipient of James' Jewish stuff.
Yeah,
that the world didn't have.
Yeah.
Okay. And somehow he's the recipient and transmitter of Peter's stuff that no one had ever seen. And more than even these, I think that he's restoring the John stuff, the mysteries of godliness, which was Mithraism, in his work. And I don't know to what extent he was aware of that, but he was doing this a century before, like 75 or 80 years before the first modern scholar drew an analogy there.
Yeah.
Before there was any archaeology, before anybody had any idea. And in my view, Joseph restored Mithraism in sections 4, 11, and 12 of the Doctrine and Covenants, the missionary sections that talk about the field is white, all ready to harvest, thrust in your sickle with all your might. Those are a Mithraic liturgy that I think Joseph may have pulled straight from the first century somehow. I don't know how it got to him, but we don't, in my opinion, the Doctrine and Covenants is the restoration of Mithraic cosmology. And I'm I'll try to show how that is so.
Can I just ask you another thing? I could ask you a million things, but we can't for forever. You see all these engravings and things on old temples and in facsimiles of people raising their arms and stuff. Are there? Have you found anything that raising a right hand versus a left hand, for example, or that sort of thing? Have you found any of that in these constellations or any of what you're doing?
So you're talking about Orion, who stands with his arm raised like this.
Yeah.
Perpetually. And everything
And you
on
see it
his
in
right
lots of
hand-
idols, and you see it on different things.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
you always see
Particularly,
them raising their arms.
right, particularly with the god associated with the iron rod, who is Orion. He's got his arm raised and he's got a rod, and so when the scriptures talk about the hold to the iron rod, and they're referring to this conceptualization of the Lord. The Lord was just the name given to the constellation Orion, and that's who the Lord was, and conceptually, right? And I don't project back onto them that they thought that was any more literal than we do. But the Lord constellation was Orion. And so we talked earlier about our perspective standing on the porch of a temple.
Yeah.
Right. And looking at the sky. Well, the Lord's perspective, Orion's perspective, is that he has his arm raised. The Milky Way is right here to his right and makes a fractal of that arm above him. It splits off into two. And so he's got his arm raised. He represents, this is a fractal of that Milky Way.
Yeah.
And so he's signifying that Milky Way.
Which could also be his arm, that Milky Way could also be like a veil.
It is the veil.
It's the veil.
So it's the veil. It's the Milky Way. The Milky Way is the veil, the tree of life, the olive tree, the fountain, the river of everlasting life, the highway.
What you pass through.
The river Jordan. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. River Jordan. Yeah.
The tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's all of those things in one. It's the ultimate multivalent symbol.
Mm.
And it's fractalized in his arm. And so everything to his right is the celestial kingdom of Leo and the congregation of the north.
Yeah.
And so when he takes his sheep through the veil, they are now on his right hand. Right? But Capricorn over here is going up the back of the body. And so Capricorn's a goat. And so he says, the sheep are on my right hand and the goats are on the left. Be a sheep, not a goat.
Right.
Go through, follow the good shepherd through the veil. We're going to be working with the front side of the body stuff. And it's saying don't just do the back. The Book of Revelation also involves all the seals of the back of the body, all the chakras. But the main event in the Christian mystery is the front of the body. It also uses the back of the body. And the Easterners use the back and the front as well.
I see. Yeah. And the different seals they associate with these different areas on the clock too? Or am I just reaching for other stuff?
It's all exactly mapped on each other correctly. You can't mix them up. They're not mixed up. The number 5 on the clock represents Pisces and the ordinance of baptism. And, they mean something.
Yeah.
Where you go wrong is if you start moving stuff around. Start making new rules for the ordinances. That's where you go wrong. Yeah. You want to stick to the ordinance. You can have all the fun with it you want. You can make any story you want, as long as the sheep doesn't grow a fish tail. You can't give the
right.
You can't stick you've got to, as long as you play by the rules, you can do anything you want.
Yeah, and that's why if there were temples going on in the ancient Americas or something, if they were following those rules, there'd be no reason to think that it would be exactly the same as, the way someone was doing it somewhere else, but they would follow some transformational ascendant sorts of ideas to get there, as long as it taught that idea.
You have exactly closed the loop on what we were trying to say at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So my mystery, which is just an artistic adventure, is to do just what you just said. According to my imagination, I think Joseph Smith was doing what he was doing according to his imagination, you know, all of the things that informed him, and he gets to build it how he conceptualizes it, right?
It's not about,
which is going to be completely different than how the Zoroastrian high priest in the court, in the Flavian court, conceptualized it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's going to be completely different than James conceptualized it in the Jerusalem temple.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As long as everybody follows the rules, this is going to work.
Yeah.
And then those different priests and priestesses from all these different temple cultures then collaborated and shared knowledge and visited each other and talked to each other and taught each other. Then they would go home and they would teach their people. And that's how you maintained accuracy and coherency. And they recognized each other. They recognized, as long as everybody's doing it according to the laws and ordinances of the gospel, you know, but it's going to look very different over here.
Yeah.
In Persia than it's going to look over here. And that's all fine. Those are how you have identity and national, you know, patriotism and faith, and, you know, that's ratified by your culture. And they shared much. And then there's other parts where they said, we're not going to share here. This is where we're going to assert our identity.
Yeah.
And you're going to have your identity, and we're going to differentiate here, and we're going to share here. And the purpose of this conversation I'm trying to start is to show that process by creating initiation of my own. And instead of being an expert when I created it, you're seeing how the sausage is made when you do the Apotheosis Scroll. I didn't understand when I started out what I understand now.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to tell you here at the beginning of it becoming public where I'm going with it, which I didn't really know when I started it.
Yeah, not to develop a certain kind of orthodoxy that's linear one way, but to teach kind of how this ascendant idea goes.
Yeah. And just to have something to talk about. If you and I talk about this together, and some of your viewers talk about it together, and then it's done it. It's done what it was intended to do, which was to spur conversation, not to create an ideology.
Well, this is interesting. I'm sure people will have all sorts of questions. I have no idea. I have no idea what questions, but I have a whole bunch more. But, you know, we could go on for hours and hours and hours, but unfortunately we can't do that today. But thank you for doing this.
I had a great time, and I'd be pleased to talk with you some more if you want to.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I thought your questions were extremely insightful and very well crafted.
Yeah.
And I think so
I know people will be interested, and there may be some people that would be like, this is just too much for me right now to consider. You know, I don't know where this goes. But for people who are interested, certainly put your questions, and maybe you would be lurking and to answer some things. And if there was another time people would like, maybe we could hone in on some of those. And you know, we didn't even get really to these panels. I would sure love to in the future, whether it was on my channel or I would be looking for you on other people's as well. To go into some of these panels, and maybe, you know, even if we looked at one and really went through all these, all you wanted to on one of the panels, I think it'd be great. But I'm grateful you did this. I'm grateful you came on. This was interesting.
Well, I think that the way that we did this overview, zoomed out a little bit, I think was more helpful than it would have been to do. I don't really care. That's just it was just a way to start a conversation, but this conversation that we just had is
what you want.
Yes. I don't care if anybody understands a particular panel of the scroll.
Mm-hmm.
What I want is to talk with you and to have a humane dialogue where we might not agree about everything. We might strongly disagree about some things. Great. Who cares? Who cares? Of course we do. Of course we disagree about some things. But let's talk about some cool stuff that
but we agree on so many things. Yeah.
I don't have any idea where those things might be. And it's about talking. You know, it's a way to get people talking in a way that kind of breaks some of the stalemate that can happen around religious communication. Right?
Yeah. We have a lot of problems in that area.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is great. I hope I can talk to you in the future. There's an open invite if you ever want to, you do have a YouTube channel. People can subscribe to that and see what you're up to. I think also, if I'm understanding right, some of the videos that exist on your website going over some of these panels individually also exist on your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I would recommend that they go to CamronColeman.com and and just kind of, it's a rabbit hole. See what art kind of gets a hold of your imagination. There was a recent 3-hour conversation on Stick of Joseph that I think was a really good intro.
Yeah.
Maybe we could link that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but yeah, it's just kind of adventure to start. So, but yeah, you can get started on it at CamronColeman.com. And yeah, but I had a great time, and I would certainly enjoy talking with you again.